out of all the magics within the series, the one that's obviously the most upfront in the series is Dragon Slaying magic, and the one we're going to be talking about today is going to be White Dragon Slayer magic. What's funny is Dragon Slaying magic in of itself, like it's super simple, like 99% of the explanation, because in reality it's really just they have a specific attribute. Like each Slayer has a specific type, and then obviously sometimes you get like hybrids and whatnot. But regardless, when they're utilizing it, they're using a specific attribute and using it in a more direct way than just like, oh yeah, casting like a big spell at somebody. Like in case of Natsu, he's not just throwing fire at people; he's also clouding himself in fire and fighting very physically, because an aspect about Dragon Slayers is they're tanks. They are very durable. In the Fairy Tail world, there are battle wizards and combat mages and stuff, people who are way more physical fighters, can take physical damage, as well as you got like old classic casters and stuff and ranged people who can do damage and generally will have crazier powers to kind of compensate, but they don't have the like physical capabilities to take nearly as much damage. And when you have a Dragon Slayer, the thing about Dragon Slayers across the board that's the most consistent of them, regardless of whatever attribute they have, is that they are durable. They are very physically set characters. And because of that, because of like the way that they have these very stern bodies and whatnot, very strong and just sturdy physical forms, they end up being melee fighters. They're really the majority of what you're gonna get from a Dragon Slayer is direct in face, hand to hand combat, throwing punches at people, kicks and whatever they can. And they have other attacks like ranged ones as well. Obviously, the roar being the most common, but for the overarching aspect of them, Dragon Slayers are taking an attribute, cladding it onto their limbs and on their body, and just going direct up into their opponent's face to do damage. And with White Dragon Slaying, it's funny because it's had like a little bit of a question in what exactly White Dragon Slaying magic is, because I think people would associate more of like literally the color white, when that's not really what it is, and it's not necessarily just light. And it was a really weird setup because Mishima went light and shadow instead of just kind of like light and dark, but a slight variation. Obviously, shadow being a little bit slightly different from just darkness or just dark. And then in Sting's case, he's using White Dragon Slaying magic. Now, what is White Dragon Slaying as it is, or just white dragons? So it's not like literally the concept of white, and I know he says he'll eat white stuff, but in the aspect of his power and what he's going to be consuming to regain magic and stamina like other Dragon Slayers can do, his is more of holy and light. It's like a variation. That's why he's got stuff like Holy Ray, Holy Nova, and whatnot, Holy Breath, and those are just like that's like a slight variation of it from the base standpoint of the power. It's kind of like how Wendy is, even though she's using wind, she's not a wind dragon slayer, she's a sky dragon slayer. It's a completely different set of that type. Kind of like how you have fire dragons, but then you also have stuff like hellfire dragons and whatnot. It's just a slight tweak on the attribute to give it something different. I think what Mishima's kind of going for was kind of like how you have a white mage in a game. They're way more kind of like healing, but when it comes to damage, they're doing holy damage. They're using like sacred light and stuff to damage their foes. But White Dragon Slaying, for whatever reason, doesn't have healing. I actually always was wondering why Mishima wouldn't give Sting a form of healing, because it wouldn't be anything too crazy if he could just do like a base amount of healing capabilities. I think he just wanted to stick with Sky for some reason, being the healing aspect of the series, because one thing about Fairy Tail is there's not a lot of healers. But if you like putting it onto White Dragon Slayers, wouldn't have really been much of a problem. Either way, it doesn't matter a whole lot, because the thing is, like, he's taking that whole holy aspect and light, and it's as weaponized as he can make it, because it's put on Dragon Slaying magic, like very melee combatant, destructive fighting magic. And he has like, in reality, like, it's funny because Sting, and he doesn't have a lot of crazy moves. None of the Dragon Slayers really have that much of a crazy move set. It's really like they have their base kind of layout of what their attribute is, how they specifically kind of dispense it, and then generally a dragon or dragon slayer has like a specific perk to their type. Like you have fire dragons can burn magic and stuff. You have things like obviously Wendy, sky dragons can heal. You have things like how shadow dragons can turn intangible, similar to also Scullion with the corpse dragons. With white dragon slaying, there was never really something outside really that crazy of its aspect. I would assume just a holy attribute on top of it being light is in of itself like a bonus. Well, the one thing that Sting has shown with it, I actually wish we would see more of, because it's a really good move. It's weird because like it's such a clutch technique to have in relatively any real fight, is his white dragon's talon. Because with something like that, he can just say, oh, well, I'm going to pretty much just lock your movements and attack. And in a lot of cases, you're not going to have a character who has a way of dispersing that, because one, you would have to be able to do it without even really moving. Like, there are techniques, obviously, some characters have. You can cancel out certain techniques and abilities, but you have to keep in mind, in the cases of when these characters are doing it, they can't move whatsoever. In the case of, like, Natsu, he just has to pretty much turn on his fire. It would burn the mark off. And obviously, there are characters that, you know, could do similar things throughout series, but it's not going to be nearly as regular as say just, oh yeah, I just literally have to activate my power and I don't have to move whatsoever. So that was, to me, like one of the better aspects of that magic in of itself, and just I almost said white shadow dragons, but like white dragons in general, just because that move in like 99% of matches is just going to be like a potential like end game thing. Like you're going to lock somebody up and just throw hands and beat the living hell out of them. But like the general kind of layout of the magic, I would say probably my favorite move of it. I do like that Sting and has like a wide range roar. Like he's got the holy breath. It's just this big destructive AoE version of his roar, whereas his normal roar is like this condensed super speed laser. And that, going into that, is one of the things that I did want to mention in the video, because it's a question a lot of people have asked about, is whether or not Sting's light is like light speed. And logically throughout the series, it's been depicted and shown that dragon elements are vastly superior to the natural ones. Dragon slayers and slayers in general can be hurt by their attribute, but you have to be so significantly above them that you absolutely can't just run into their ability to adapt or consume that specific attribute from from your moveset. Like, obviously in a case of someone like Sting, it's light or a holy power, and that would mean that the natural version is also going to be inferior to the dragon version. And I would say the kind of like line, at least in my head, that I would draw of like when that would apply, because I don't think it's like the second you get it, you're automatically like all your attacks would be faster than light. I personally, at least in my head, I would say that point where they become, when Sting would say real dragon slayers, is just that point in their dragonification where they get stuff like motion sickness and whatnot, because that's clearly a point in the dragonification process that is significant, because we saw Gajeel and Wendy didn't have that when they were first introduced. Gajeel getting that during the 3 months that he was training for the Grand Magic Games, clearly getting more powerful and progressing his strength and prowess in dragon slaying magic, whereas Wendy got hers over the course of the time skip after Tartaros and gaining the ability to use Dragon Force at will. So it's one of the things, it wouldn't make any logical sense for specifically Sting's attribute to be inferior to the natural version. It just wouldn't really make any consistent sense from what's been depicted and set up in the story, as well as it would make no real sense for white dragons, or even if they just get like a base light dragon in general, to somehow be the only one that's inferior to the natural version of their attribute. It wouldn't make any logical sense for just one of them to be vastly inferior. So it would only make sense if at a certain point it would just kind of exceed the natural one. And again, that should apply to every single Dragon Slayer once they're like getting to a point with their attributes, because again, none of them have ever been inferior to their natural element depicted in the series. I mean, even like beginning of series, Gajia was eating through metal like it was toast, and you know, Natsu eating fire and whatnot. It's not something that they would logically ever have any trouble with when it comes to them having to deal with their natural versions of their element or any variation that is inferior to them. So I personally I like White Dragon Slaying magic. I definitely would pick it over Shadow Dragon Slaying magic. But obviously one thing about it is like we've seen way more White Dragon techniques than Shadow Dragon techniques. And I think that when you really break it down to the two types, I personally like the whole being able to lock somebody's movement up way more than just being intangible. Though I would say, like, Rogue's ability to go inside shadows is really cool. But, like, you lock somebody's body up, you potentially just won the match. You could pretty much just turn them into a punching bag at that point. So, when it comes to this one, it's definitely one of the cooler Dragon Slaying attributes, personally, I think. Just because, like, we have so many moves for it. Like, it's got a lot of really sick techniques. Again, like I said, the fact that it has a speed and AoE version of its breath attacks is really cool, and it has the whole added attribute of holy. Like so if you run into any characters who are weak to holy attacks, bam, you have double aspects to a single type of magic to use. So it's like, oh, you know, some characters are weak to light, or some of their powers are weak to light. Some of them have a weakness to like sacred and holy attacks. Bam, Sting's got both. Plus he's a Dragon Slayer, so he's durable as hell. Like, he's got, like, a really solid moveset. I really wish we got more displays of them. I would like to see more of it in 100 Years Quest and see what Sting and Rogue would be capable of now, but also, obviously, like, what a White Shadow Dragon can do to add on to it. Because, obviously, I got to do that at some point after I do Shadow Dragon magic. I'll do a convening point between these two and talk about White Shadow Dragon magic. We actually have a good amount to go off of for that. Actually, I think we have like more on White Shadow Dragon magic than we do on like actual Shadow Dragon magic, or at least around the same, which is kind of funny. Either way, though, I think this was like a pretty solid pick. I know people really wanted me to talk about it. I think I've got my plan figured out about like how I'm going to keep more consistent with the one archive videos. I'm just going to kind of stagger. I've got a plan just as a TLDR for the people that, you know, I've stuck all the way near the end. I'm just going to have, like, smaller videos that I'm going to do in between the ones that will be voted upon, because I assume voted on ones will be way longer. Whereas, like, one that I'm doing that I'm going to do after this in between the next one will be palm magic. So, like, Bacchus's magic. That'll take me, like, 5 minutes to explain. It'll be no problem. But anyway, other than that, comment below. I mean, the only real thing I didn't really talk about was, like, oh, yeah, you eventually will turn it to a dragon, but that's Dragon Slaying magic, not specifically White Dragon Slaying magic. I think I've almost said White Shadow Dragon magic like 10 times in this video. But anyway, other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, friend like, but subscribe and check out my other videos. But other than that, appreciate everybody's already subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.